Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fortified Life podcast, where we talk about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every week, we have the honor of bringing on authors, speakers, coaches, people that are passionate about putting God back in business. And it's no different this week. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the individual that we have on the show today, I'm very excited about. I've just recently gotten to know him on a deeper level. He's a man of transparency. He'll talk more about that later. But before I bring him on, let me introduce him to you. Ford Taylor is the founder of FSH Consulting Group and Transformational Leadership Training, which provide cultural and classic consulting, executive coaching, conflict resolution, how to provide discipline, and how to remove personal and organizational constraints, and team building to businesses and all types of organizations. Ford offers his training through teaching live classes as well as through an online virtual interactive platform called TL On Demand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life, Ford Taylor. Ford, how's it going, sir?
I'm doing well, Jason. It's so I should say, Mr. Jason Fortify Davis. It's an honor to be on here with you. I loved our time together down in Atlanta. Anyway, it's just an honor that you would ask me to be on with you. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for all you're doing, the lives you're impacting. You're a blessing.
Thank you, Ford. Now, Ford, when we look at your bio, and folks, it's even more extensive in that God has graced Ford to be part of a lot of different things in his lifetime. But Ford, we know you just didn't wake up in 2024 doing what you're doing. So kind of give us a chronicle, give us a timeline of your professional experience.
Okay. Well, Jason, I'll go all the way back. Born and raised in Paris, Texas. Went to school at Texas A&M University. I met my wife there when she was a freshman and I was a senior, so I kind of put my career on hold so she could graduate. Worked at a local sporting goods store as the manager. I'd been the assistant manager. I had some really good mentors. Worked at a sporting goods store for 3 years in high school, and then again in college, and then again as the manager. Went to work at another store, got a call saying they were going to close down our screen printer and that I needed to find another one because I was 24 years old and they were going to close them down. They were going bankrupt. A couple of days later, they called back and said, by any chance, would you like to take on the debt and own this company? I talked to my wife. She graduated in May of 82, and we took on this company in June of 82 at 25 years old. And I never heard the term due diligence. And so I thought, well, why not do this? On paper, it was a mistake, but by the grace of God, it worked. And I literally do mean by the grace of God. And over the next 16 years, found ourselves as the largest decorated sportswear apparel company in America. And a lot of people hear that and they go, wow, that's awesome. And, on one side, that looks like a lot of success. On the other side, I might have been, if not the most arrogant, one of the most arrogant people on the planet, thinking I was God's gift to business, not that He had gifted me in business. A lot of insecurity, from the sexual abuse as a little boy. Ended up cheating on my wife for a season. The good news is God got a hold of me and brought me back into the fold. And Jason, I got to tell you, I knew when it came time to confess to my wife what I had done, I had zero doubt she would leave me. And again, told her she had the right. But when I confessed it to her and said, it's all my fault. You didn't deserve this at all. I know you're going to leave me. Please don't take the kids away from me. I hope one day you can forgive me. She responded, why would I leave you? I love you more than anything. I forgive
Wow.
you. We'll get through this. And I wept. And I thought to myself, I've been in church my whole life. And doggone it, if I'm not looking straight into the eyes of Jesus, and it happens to be my wife. And I thought to myself, I want to be like that. And so started doing some work, kind of one-off consulting work, started doing some city reaching. And then one of my clients called me in his office one day and said, when you're consulting or owned all these different companies over the years, how often do you get these kinds of results? And I said, every time. And he said, then why aren't you using this material to impact the city as opposed to just the companies? And I'll never forget, I responded, if all those leaders really knew who I was, they wouldn't follow me. At that
Mm,
time, Sandra had not really, we were restoring our marriage, so she had not given me permission to share it. And then later, after helping a handful of couples privately, I went to her and said, if we'd share our whole story, think of all the people we could help, not just in the companies, but in churches. And eventually, I felt like God laid on my heart that if I would keep my name off of it, that He would give me something. I journaled this in the summer of 2000, um, that if I'd keep my name off of it, He would take this work global, but it would be Him, and that I felt like He asked me to go apply my gifts to help other people be successful. And if I would do that, He would make this training successful. And so that was the approach we took. And here we are in 2024. That's what's happened. This training is in governments and countries around the world. We have a lot of people doing it. And again, just like that first company that grew from, didn't think we were going to make it in 6 months. But by the grace of God, we did. Gave us some strategies that worked. Just like we found ourselves 16 years later, here we are again, 20 years later, over 20 years later, finding out that God has moved again. And
mm.
in all that, I learned that, kingdom biblical principles, and I did not know all this was kingdom biblical principles until I took it to my pastor and asked him, by any chance, is any of this in the Bible? And he brought it back to me and said, you have no idea what you have. And I said, well, where is it? And he said, find it yourself. And so what I learned over those years is that it really, no matter what we're doing in our private lives, I don't want to justify people to stay in your private life inappropriately. Just don't do that. But I do know his principles work based on him, not based on us. And so even applying these principles all those years ago in a time that my private life was not lined up with him, the principles still worked, even though my personal life was not lined up. And then when I
Mm.
found out when the personal life is lined up, of course, we're not going to be fully lined up till we die. But when we are lined up, those principles even work better. So thank you for asking, but that's kind of the progression of what happened.
My goodness, Ford. And folks, it's I've heard Ford share this live, so it's just I get something. I'm even picking up different things now. And so Ford, one thing that I love about you, and this is important for our listeners too, is you talk very transparently and with vulnerability about what you've been through. And Ford, you do a really good job of highlighting. I think people know it internally, but when they're in a circumstance, they're not thinking about it. And that's, you said it correctly. What's going on inside your heart? Those things come out in meetings and how you do business, your integrity, your character, and so forth. Just and thinking about that, why do you think we, especially sometimes in the body of Christ, why do we struggle with this compartmentalization so much? Where I got to be one way at home, and then I got to be a different way with my board of directors, and then a different way in the customer meeting. Why do we struggle with that so much, in your opinion?
Well, I have this message I've given before, and it's called the best kept secret in Christianity, forgiveness. And so what happens is many of us might go to churches that have a shame-based theology. you
Mm,
know, find Jesus or burn in hell. And they call that the good news of the gospel. I got news. That's not the good news of the gospel. The good news is the grace, it's the forgiveness. And so what happens is we judge one another instead of forgive one another. And Jason, the truth is everybody's got a story.
mm,
Only those too prideful to admit it have the ability to judge others. And I tell
mm.
people, you show me the most judgmental person in the room, and I'll show you the one with the biggest secret. And
Wow.
so, and what I've found is that the more we do confess our stuff, the more vulnerable we are, a number of things happen. Number one, we get freedom from it. So that's number one. We start feeling forgiven. And when we feel forgiven by God, we feel loved by God. And when we feel loved and forgiven, just like my wife. when she felt loved and forgiven, she could freely give me that love and forgiveness. And like I say, I want to learn how to do that. And so I've learned that over the years. And so I don't worry if someone wants to walk out of the room based on vulnerability, because I know whoever walks out, they probably got the biggest secret. And sometimes maybe when we're together and I'm doing something live, you can come stand on stage and kind of look over my shoulder. And when I share some of these things about, men, we all have that same battle, you know, and when I share some of that, guys, look, I'm still working on the lust issue. I mean, all of us are. And whether that's around food or sex or whatever it is, it's a self-control thing. And so when I share that, I sometimes just look over my shoulder at the couples in the room, how the men are just kind of looking up like, don't say anything else, don't say anything else, don't go any further. And I don't. But my point is, it's just, we feel so judged. And so we hold these things in. And as we hold them in, they get worse because in our private life, and I did it, I'm not, I can't judge anyone. Why do so many people share their things with me? Because they know I can't judge them. But what would happen if we had a whole church that did this? What if
Mm,
our pastors were standing in the pulpit sharing what is really going on in their marriage or what's really going on in their head? What if the business leaders in businesses, what if they saw themselves? And this is what we teach them. You are the shepherd in your business. Okay. Why don't we teach you how to shepherd, pastor, if you will, in an appropriate way, and you become vulnerable and transparent. What'll happen is your team will know that you're human. And you know what? They'll draw closer to you. They will not reject you. They will not run out the door. They will say, "Wow, I've got a boss that's human." And what we found over these years is these companies just grow by leaps and bounds. The commitment they get from their employees, they want to be there with those people who are vulnerable and transparent. They don't make themselves look smarter. They don't make themselves look more biblically educated. They just go in the room and be human. Now, they're
mm,
smart people, trust me. I mean, they're brilliant when it comes to business but when they get that heart and that head connected, it's just a game changer. And when they have that kind of impact on their employees, guess what? Their employees have that kind of impact on their families. And guess what? When the employees have that kind of impact on their families, because their marriage is better, their parenting better, they start impacting their next door neighbor. They start
mm,
impacting the people in their church. So it's just this thing that just continues to grow. And I think that's what God has called us to. I just think we've done something different over the years. And therefore, when we are vulnerable and transparent, most people are afraid that they'll get judged by their peers, and
mm,
especially Christians. Um, and so they don't. And so they stay bound in their stuff instead of getting freedom from it.
mm. That's a good word for that, as they say in the church, that will preach.
That's funny. That's good. Yeah.
Ford, a lot of what you do working with companies, the notion of forgiveness. And a lot of times we think that's just a personal thing. But what I love is in your training, you talk about something, giving a six-step apology. A lot of people think that they're apologizing and they're really not. And it's one of the most insightful things that I took away from your teachings and trainings in the past. So talk to the audience about the six-step apology and what happens when people um, do this from a restoration perspective.
Yeah. So, Jason, when we go into organizations, whether we're working with the government in Ethiopia or planting 10,000 churches with this material, which we've done in one country in Africa, what they find out is that when we apply biblical principles, whether you're in a business, a church, a government, education system, when you apply those principles, the principles work. And one of those is resolving conflict. Most
Mm,
people think conflict is bad. I don't believe that. I don't think conflict is bad. I think unresolved conflict is bad. Why?
yeah.
Conflict plus resolution leads to unity, engagement, and productivity. In a marriage, conflict plus resolution leads to intimacy. With God, conflict plus resolution leads to intimacy. And so conflict's not bad, it's unresolved conflict. And so when we go into organizations, we found that there are 9 common constraints. Okay. One of those 9 is conflict or discipline avoidance. So in this tool of how to resolve conflict, one of the things we put in there is how to approach one another in an area of where maybe you think you're being mistreated. So we start there and we say, if you go to that person in humility. So if I came to you, Jason, I said, Jason, could I share something with you? I may be wrong. It may be me and nobody else may feel this way. So when you start from that perspective and you go with pre-forgiveness, which is grace, and then number three, you go in love. What does that mean? Jason, I care more about you than I care about how you feel about me.
Mm,
Why? Because if I'm right, and I may not be, but if I am, what if your behavior is affecting your marriage, your children, your ability to get a promotion at work, and no one's loved you enough to tell you? And then number four, with 100% of the truth, because sometimes the truth and the facts are not the same. So one side of this conflict tool is how to go to someone, and the other side is what do you do if you've messed up? Whether somebody came to you or not, if you knew you messed up, what would you do? If someone came to you, what would you do? And we believe there's 6 steps to an appropriate apology. And some of these steps, the reason I believe they're appropriate is I believe they're biblical, but they're also practical. And step number one is if I did something to you, I would state what I did. So that's number one. Jason, you're right. When I poured coffee on your head in front of all those people, that was disrespectful. But my point is, I would call out the event. Number two, 3 simple words. I was wrong. And that's hard for a lot of people to even use those 3 words. But what happens is when we go in and we say what we did, no ifs, no explanations, I did it and I was wrong. And number three, I am sorry. I tell people if you were raised in a home that you were told you're a sorry little son of a gun or had a football coach that told you that, that word may mean something different. So just say, I apologize. But don't say, I want to say I'm sorry. I want to tell you I apologize. That's not an apology. That's a desire, but it's not. So number one, state the offense. Number two, say I was wrong. Number three, say I'm sorry. And number four is a big one. Will you forgive me? Or when you can, will you forgive me? That's the one that most people don't ask. And what happens is because that one is such a big one, I tell people don't expect an answer immediately. Give them some time and space to choose forgiveness. But once you ask it, you're finished. But once you give it, you're healed. I mean, and
mm,
that's what God's word said. And then step number five is I give you permission to hold me accountable to never behave this way again with you, or if you see me doing it with someone else, someone else. And number six is the big one. Is there anything else I owe you an apology for or that you want to talk about? And when we walk into a room when we've messed up, especially in our marriage or with our children or with those closest to us, but with anybody, that is a genuine, sincere apology. And it means I'm willing to change my behavior, which is what repentance is. It's turning from old behavior to new behavior. And so spiritually, it's the right thing to do. But practically, if you'll do it, you'll get tired of saying I'm wrong. I mean, honestly, you'll get tired of saying hold me accountable. And so you'll change your behavior just on practicality.
yeah.
But even spiritually, it's the right thing to do. So you get both benefits from that one.
Wow. So powerful, Ford. Um, just so much about being relational. And I'm setting up a segue for your book, Ford. I love, there's a lot of different personality and behavioral assessments out there, but I like, Ford, how you say that there are two groups of people, those who are relational and those who are more action based. And so talk to us about your book, Relational Leadership. And I love that title for it. And I have a copy for myself, but just talk to the audience about um, the comparing and contrasting the two types and how they are better together and where the growth opportunity is if somebody's a little bit more relational and if someone is a little bit more action oriented.
Yeah. So there's 9 continuums we teach, and one of them is called this relationship continuum. And on one end of this continuum, as you said, we
Oh,
have,
uh-oh, Ford, I think you went on mute.
uh-oh. All right, can you hear me now?
Yep, I sure can.
I think we got hammered by that little Microsoft thing because my it never showed mute. So I think we had a little disruption. I'm sorry about that.
No, 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 all good. We're all back. We can edit that out. That's not a problem.
Very good. So we teach these continuums, and one of them is called the relationship continuum. And on one end of this continuum, as you said, we have people that are highly relational. In the other end, we have people that are highly transactional. Relational people wake up in the morning thinking about who they get to be with. They wake up, they go to bed at night thinking about their meetings and the people they got to be with that day. Highly transactional people wake up in the morning thinking about all the things I've got to get done, and they go to bed at night thinking about everything they got checked off their list. Now, this is not a right or wrong. It's two different personality types. And what we found also, Jason, over the years of doing research in rooms where we ask people to raise their hand, it's well over 90% of the time in a marriage, one of them is more transactional and one of them is more relational. But it also happens on teams in your workspace, whether that's church, government, school, business. But teams are made up of people who are highly relational and others who are highly transactional. And those two groups of people drive each other crazy. And so the name of the book is called Relational Leadership. It is a word that I actually trademarked and copyrighted. And we show people in this book how to get relational people to be more transactional without giving up their natural bent to be relational, and how to get transactional, task-oriented people to be more relational without giving up their natural bent to be transactional. And when they move towards each other and they honor each other and respect one another for what they bring to the table, that what Sandra brings to the table is different than what I bring to the table. But when we honor each other for what we bring to the table, we meet in the middle and we become relational. And how do we know we're relational? We take the time to build a relationship that no transaction can separate us. And Sandra
Mm.
proved that. She's more transactional, I'm more relational, but she proved that even that ugly transaction didn't separate us. And then the other sign is that you can stand on this continuum and you can look down towards the relational and you can look down towards the transactional, and neither one of them drive you crazy anymore. And when you have a team of people that says we need both of those teams at the table, but when you have the skill set, if you're highly relational, to understand that you like to tell stories, you like to talk before the work begins. When there's a conflict, you you you're going to revert to your tendency, which is being sure everybody's okay. You're going to prioritize the relationship. But if you're transactional, if you can realize that you like to get the work done before you chit chat, if there's stress, you're going to move towards getting the transaction done instead of focused on the relationship. So you prioritize it differently. But if we could learn that, so if I'm highly relational and you're highly transactional and we work together, and I know that, it's important that I set up a time to meet with you. That I don't just walk in your office and start blurting out a story because now I'm
Hmm.
driving you crazy. If you're highly transactional, it's important that you come say hello to me in the morning. Because you know what? When my relationship tank is full, I'm going to be more transaction oriented. I'm going to get the job done better. When a transactional person's tank is full from a transactional perspective, guess what? They're going to be more relational because they know that the transaction is getting done. But again, if we could honor one another and help each other by knowing that about one another and filling the other one's gas tank, guess what happens? We're all more productive. We're not
Mm.
driving each other crazy over it. We're more productive from it.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Relational Leadership by Ford Taylor. Ford, where can people get a copy of the book?
Well, they could get it on Amazon. They could go to our website. We have a website called transformlead.com. In 2020, when we couldn't travel anymore, I got a lot of requests from around the world. How are we going to hear from you? And they talked me into doing a podcast. Well, I didn't know when I agreed to do a podcast, you have to have a place to host it. So we have another website that a marketing person actually gave it this name, but it's called FordTaylorTalks.com. And so Amazon, transformlead.com, if people wanted to listen to podcasts or blogs, all that's on FordTaylorTalks.com. And then you mentioned it earlier, the interactive training platform. is called tlondemand.com. So all those different places, are ways to access a lot of these different things, including the book.
I love it. And folks, don't you worry. Ford's dropped a lot of gems. We will have all Ford's information in the show notes, TL on Demand, his book, as well as the podcast. Well, Ford, I know you're a busy man and you have a lot of things God has called you to do, so we won't hold you. Just want to thank you so much, Ford, for taking time out to hang out with us here on the Fortified Life. Can't thank you enough. We'll have to do this again at a future time.
Well, like I told you early on, thank you for what you're doing. It's an honor to be on here with you. And when somebody's impacting lives like you are, all you got to do is ask, and I'll come be a part of it and join you. And hopefully we can do it together because we all know if you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And you're one of those people going together with that. I hope your listeners will continue going together with you because you're making an impact. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Ford. And indeed, I could not agree more. Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on this episode of the Fortified Life. Again, show notes, you can access them, fortifiedlifepodcast.com. And I promise you, you'll be able to get all of Ford's information. Folks, you know how we leave things. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.